Elena had always felt uneasy around Mark's coworkers, but she told herself it was normal. People in tight-knit office groups often shared a strange energy, inside jokes, quiet alliances, and unspoken tensions. Still, the moment she stepped into the house that evening, she felt something shift. The laughter felt forced, the smiles too sharp, and the atmosphere heavy with an undercurrent she couldn't name. Mark, normally glued to her side at social events, drifted away almost instantly. He moved with an urgency she'd never seen before, heading straight toward two men she barely recognized. They stood in the corner, the kind of men who watched everything but revealed nothing, their eyes tracking her as she walked in. Mark whispered something to them, and they all glanced at her at the same time, three faces with the same unreadable expression. Elena's stomach tightened. She brushed it off, forcing a polite smile as she made small talk, but something was wrong. The house felt too warm, the music too soft, and the lights too dim. It was as if the environment itself was trying to lull her into lowering her guard. During a lull in conversation, one of Mark's coworkers approached with a drink. She hesitated. She wasn't much of a drinker, and she hadn't asked for one, but Mark appeared behind him, urging her with a hand on her back. "Just one?" he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elena took the drink to avoid drawing attention. Moments later, a strange sensation washed over her. Not dizziness, not drunkenness, but a fog, a slow blurring around the edges of her thoughts. She blinked, trying to shake it off. She'd had wine before. This was different. She looked around the room and caught Mark staring at her. Not with concern, not with affection, with anticipation. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A cold chill slid down her spine. She approached him, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mark, I'm not feeling so good. Can we go home?" He avoided her eyes. "You're fine. You just need to relax a little." His tone was wrong, too dismissive, too practiced. Elena tried again, firmer this time. "I want to leave now." Mark's expression hardened. "Elena, please. Don't make a scene." The room suddenly felt smaller. People were watching, pretending not to. The two coworkers lingered behind Mark like shadows, their presence forming a barrier she couldn't quite decipher. Her pulse quickened. Never in her marriage had she felt so alone while standing right beside her husband. A wave of heat pulsed through her body again, and she steadied herself on a chair. She knew she needed air, space, something to clear her head. She spotted a hallway leading to what looked like a quiet room. Just a moment away from the noise might help, but as she stepped toward that open door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward the exact moment her life would split into before and after. And she was right. Elena pushed open the guest room door, hoping for a moment of quiet, a place to gather herself, breathe, and shake off the strange fog swirling in her mind. The soft lamplight inside felt like a refuge compared to the tense murmurs and half-hidden stares of the party. For a brief second, she imagined closing the door and escaping the buzzing anxiety clinging to her. But the moment she stepped in, the door clicked behind her. Not gently, not accidentally, with purpose. Elena turned. Mark stood in the doorway, blocking her exit. His posture was stiff, his jaw locked tight, his eyes fixed on her in a way she had never seen before. Something inside him, something she didn't recognize, had taken over. "Mark?" she whispered, trying to sound calm. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside slightly, enough for two silhouettes to appear behind him. The same coworkers who'd been whispering with him earlier. The same men who'd watched her as if she were an object of interest, no, an experiment. Her breath hitched. Why are they here? Still, no answer. The two men entered the room, not aggressively, but with a kind of silent authority that made Elena's heartbeat thud in her ears. When Mark remained in the doorway instead of stepping in to shield her, confusion crashed into her like a tidal wave. "Mark, say something." He swallowed. His eyes darted between her and the man, and that tiny hesitation spoke volumes. He wasn't confused. He wasn't surprised. He was conflicted, and that meant he knew exactly why they were here. Elena's chest tightened. One of the men spoke first. "We just want to talk," he said, voice low, too calm, too controlled. "Mark told us a lot about you." The words hit harder than they should have. What had Mark been saying? Why would he talk about her to them? And why did they say it like some kind of evaluation? Elena backed up until her shoulder hit the dresser. "About me? Why? What did he tell you?" Neither man answered immediately. They exchanged a look, one of those silent, loaded exchanges that meant decisions had already been made, that she was already trapped in whatever game they were playing. Her gaze snapped to Mark. "Stop this. Whatever this is, stop it. Tell them to leave." His lips parted slightly, but again, nothing came out. His silence was a knife. The room seemed to tilt. The faint dizziness from before returned, tightening around her thoughts like a foreign hand. Something about her drink. Something about the whispers. Something about all the glances she had ignored because she trusted him. "Mark," she said again, voice breaking, "why are you letting this happen?" His shoulders sagged, not with regret, but with shame. A shame that confirmed her worst fear. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a feint misunderstanding. This had been planned. The two men stepped closer. Not touching her, just closing the space, hemming her in, surrounding her with their presence. Their expressions were unreadable, cold, clinical. As if she were part of some assessment Mark had involved her in. Her legs trembled. She realized then with devastating clarity that the betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here, and Mark was choosing to stand with them. The room felt colder even though the air was still. Elena stood rigid, every instinct screaming at her to leave, yet her body felt heavy, drained by the fog still clouding her senses. The two men didn't touch her, didn't shout, didn't threaten. Somehow, that made everything worse. Their calmness was calculated, rehearsed, almost professional, like people performing a test they'd run through before. One of them folded his arms. "Mark told us you've been unhappy in your marriage," he said with an unsettling certainty. "He said you keep secrets, that you don't trust him." Elena's heart lurched. "What? That's not true." "Mark, why would you say that?" But Mark remained frozen in the doorway, like a guard who had chosen to protect everyone but her. His eyes stayed on the floor, shameful, avoidant, exposed. The second man stepped closer, not enough to touch her, but close enough for her to feel trapped. "We just want to hear your side. Tell the truth. Are you loyal to him? To this marriage? Because from what he told us, we're not sure." Elena's breath came out in a shaky rush. This wasn't a conversation. This was an interrogation. A psychological ambush disguised as concern. Suddenly the whispers at the party, the drink she hadn't asked for, the way they'd all looked at her, it all clicked. "Is this some kind of test?" she demanded, voice trembling. "Did Mark ask you to do this? To corner me? To intimidate me?" Mark flinched. A tiny movement, but enough. The answer was yes. The betrayal burned hotter than anything she'd ever felt. Her own husband, her partner, her confidant had set her up. Not to protect her. Not to help her. But to analyze her. To expose her. To prove something to men she barely knew. The first coworker sighed, almost impatiently. "We're just trying to understand who you really are. Mark said you've been distant. That he doesn't know if he can trust you." Elena shook her head, disbelief crashing over her. "Distant? Because he stopped talking to me? Because he's been lying? And now you think you can corner me to make me confess to something I didn't do? The other exchanged a glance with Mark. She's defensive, he murmured. Just like you said. Elena's chest tightened at the language clinical, detached. As if she were a case file, not a person. As if Mark had been discussing her in a way that stripped her of dignity, truth, and humanity. Look at me, she whispered to Mark, tears burning her eyes. Tell them to stop. Tell them you didn't mean what you said. Mark finally looked up, and in his eyes she didn't see love or concern or even conflict. She saw cowardice. He wasn't going to stop them. He wasn't going to defend her. He wasn't going to admit he'd lied. His silence stabbed deeper than any words, and in that moment, Elena understood something with a clarity that shook her to her core. The man she married wasn't standing with her. He was standing with them, and her trust, every last fragile piece, shattered. Elena didn't remember moving, only the sudden jolt of her body propelling toward the door. Past Mark, past the two men, as if survival itself had seized control of her legs. The guest room, with its suffocating tension and shadow-filled corners, fell away behind her. She stumbled down the hallway, gripping the wall to steady herself as the lingering fog in her mind pulsed like a warning siren. Someone called her name, Mark's voice, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her instincts, numb for months, finally screamed awake. She burst out the front door and into the cold night. The air hit her face like water, sharp and cleansing. For a moment she stood there on the porch, panting, staring at the quiet neighborhood as the house behind her hummed with low voices and clinking glasses. As if nothing monstrous had just happened, her body trembled uncontrollably. Not from the cold, but from clarity. What they had done wasn't physical. It wasn't overt. But it was violence all the same. They had cornered her, prejudged her, tried to break her emotionally, to force her into confessions she didn't owe anyone. And Mark, the man who vowed to protect her, had handed her over like an offering to earn approval from men who didn't respect either of them. She walked toward her car, fumbling for her keys with shaking hands. She dropped them twice before finally unlocking the door. That's when she heard fast footsteps behind her. Elena! Stop! Mark. She closed the door halfway, leaving it cracked open but ready to slam shut if she needed to. He reached the car, face flushed, breathing hard. Please, listen. It wasn't what it looked like. She let out a humorless laugh, nearly choking on it. Really? Because it looked like you brought two men into a room to interrogate your wife. I wasn't. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I've been under a lot of pressure. They're important at work. They think our marriage is complicated. I wanted to show them. You wanted to show them what, Mark? She snapped. That you're in control? That you're the victim? That your wife is some unstable woman who needs to be cornered like she's on trial? His jaw clenched. I didn't think you'd react like that. The words cut deeper than anything the men had said. So you did think about it, she whispered. You planned it. He looked away. Silence answered for him. Something in her chest broke cleanly. Not with drama. Not with screaming. But with a stillness that felt like truth settling into place. I'm leaving, she said. She got into the car, shut the door, and locked it before he could speak again. Through the windshield, she saw him raise his hands helplessly, then drop them. Helpless and small under the porch light. She drove to her sister's house. Heart pounding, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Tears came only when she parked in the driveway, quiet, exhausted tears from a heart that had finally accepted what it had been trying to deny. Marriage she thought she had was gone. What remained was the aftermath. And the long road to reclaiming herself. Elena barely slept that night at her sister's house. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the guest room, the shadows on the walls, the men closing in, Mark's blank expression as he stood by and let it happen. She replayed his excuses in her mind, each one thinner than the last, until they dissolved completely. By morning, the fog in her body had lifted. But the fog around her marriage had never been clearer. When Mark finally texted, his messages came in rapid bursts. "We need to talk. Please don't leave it like this." I didn't mean for it to go that far. Elena ignored him for hours, letting him stew in the silence he had once forced her into. Only in the afternoon did she agree to meet him, but in a public place, a cafe near her sister's house. She wanted witnesses this time. She wanted safety. When Mark walked in, he looked nothing like the confident man who had presided over her humiliation the night before. His shoulders sagged. His eyes were bloodshot. But Elena didn't feel sympathy, only a distant ache, like looking at an old photograph of someone she used to love. He sat down, wringing his hands. "Elena, I messed up. I know I did. But you don't understand the situation." "Then make me understand," she said coolly. "Start from the beginning. No lies. No excuses." Mark inhaled sharply, as if bracing for impact. They think I'm weak at work. That I can't handle pressure. That I let my home life affect my performance. When I talk about us, they listen. They give advice. They think they're helping. Elena stiffened. "When you talk about us, what have you told them?" He swallowed hard. "Just things. That you get emotional. That you've been distant. That I don't know where your loyalties are anymore." Her breath caught not from shock but from confirmation. She had sensed this for months. The way he had twisted her frustrations into personal attacks. The way he had cast himself as misunderstood. The hero of his own narrative. "You lied," she said quietly. "I exaggerated," he corrected, eyes flashing with a defensive edge. "They respect honesty. They need to know I can take control. If they think my marriage is slipping, that gives them the right to corner me? Intimidate me? Judge me?" She snapped out. Mark winced. "No, they weren't supposed to corner you. They just wanted to see if you were. If I was really what?" Her voice cracked. "The villain you told them I was?" He couldn't answer, and that silence, more than the guest room, more than the men, more than the whole twisted night, was the final proof. He had betrayed her long before last night, not with another woman, but with lies, with character assassination, with his need for male approval over his duty to protect her. Elena leaned back, suddenly calm. A calmness that came not from forgiveness, but from severing the last thread tying her to him. "You didn't just break my trust, Mark," she said. "You handed it to them in pieces." Tears filled his eyes, but she didn't waver. She now knew the truth, and she knew what she needed to do. Next out, Elena left the cafe without looking back. Mark called after her, but his voice sounded small, distant, like someone shouting from the bottom of a well. She didn't owe him another glance. The moment she stepped outside, a crisp wind swept over her, lifting strands of her hair and clearing the last remnants of the toxic night from her lungs. For the first time in months, she could breathe. Back at her sister's house, Elena finally told the full story, every detail, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation. Instead of judgment, she found warmth, protection, and the kind of comfort she hadn't felt in her marriage for years. Her sister listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with anger on Elena's behalf. "Sweetheart," she finally said, "what they did wasn't just cruel. It was abuse. Emotional, psychological. And he let it happen." The words hit Elena with unexpected force. Abuse. She had avoided naming it, afraid that acknowledging the truth would make it more real. But now, hearing it spoken aloud, something inside her shifted. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't overreacting. She wasn't imagining the harm. She had been betrayed in a way that didn't leave bruises, but left scars all the same. The next week was quiet but transformative. Elena met with a therapist who helped her unpack the deeper roots of the pain, the manipulation, the isolation, the way Mark had slowly chipped away at her confidence long before the incident. Every session strengthened her resolve. Every word she spoke out loud reclaimed a piece of her she didn't know she'd lost. Meanwhile, Mark's messages became increasingly frantic. "We can fix this. We're stronger than one mistake. Please don't throw our marriage away. They misunderstood you. It wasn't that serious." That last line sealed his fate. He still believed the harm he orchestrated was a misunderstanding. A small misstep, something she was overreacting to. Elena blocked his number. She contacted a lawyer, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Ending the marriage wasn't revenge, it was survival. It was choosing peace over chaos, self-worth over humiliation, safety over emotional entrapment. The day she signed the divorce papers, she walked out of the attorney's office feeling lighter than she had in years. The sun was warm. The sky was wide. For the first time in a long time, her future didn't feel like something being shaped by someone else. It felt like hers. She later chose to share her story anonymously online, not for attention, but for others who might be drowning quietly in relationships where betrayal didn't always look like cheating or violence. She wanted them to know that psychological cruelty counts, that silence can be abuse, that being cornered emotionally is still being cornered. Her final words echoed through hundreds of comments. Infidelity isn't just physical. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is watching the person you love stand by and do nothing. And as she closed her laptop that night, Elena knew one more truth. He stood there and watched. But she was the one who rose, walked away, and reclaimed her life.